Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Have you ever sat across from someone you loved, someone you trusted, feeling like something just didn't add up? You're listening, you're present, but somehow the story keeps changing. The facts feel slippery. The truth is right there, but it won't stay still. You start to question yourself. Maybe I misheard, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe it's just stress. But deep down, a quiet voice whispers, something's wrong. I want to talk to you, especially the men watching, about a truth that's often difficult to face. Not all manipulations come with shouting, chores, or betrayal in plain sight. Some are subtle, smooth, disguised as care, as vulnerability, as intimacy. And when a woman cheats, but wants to keep the world believing she's still the innocent one, narrative becomes her weapon of choice. Not because she's evil or heartless, but because fear, guilt, and shame are powerful motivators. And so she rewrites the script bit by bit until she's no longer the villain, but the victim. And you become the reason, the cause, the silence keeper. Today, we're going to step inside that silence. We'll uncover 5 emotional strategies some women use to flip the script and protect their image, even while breaking the trust that holds a relationship together. Not to blame, not to shame, but to understand, to reclaim clarity, and to begin seeing clearly where love might have made you blind. It always starts small, doesn't it? A slight shift in her behavior, the late night text she hides, the way her eyes don't quite meet yours when you ask how her day was. Maybe it's the laughter at a joke she won't explain, or the sudden need for space that wasn't there before. You feel it in your gut, but your heart keeps talking you down. Because you love her, and because you're not the man who wants to become paranoid over nothing. But here's where it gets complicated. She senses your hesitation, she feels your confusion, and in that space between what she knows and what she fears you might uncover, something begins to stir. Not confession, not honesty, but control. You see, when the truth becomes a threat to the story she wants to live in, when admitting her betrayal means dismantling the life she's built, the reputation she values, or even the image she holds of herself, what often follows is not a heartfelt apology, but a careful rewrite, and the first tool she reaches for, emotional inversion. It sounds like this: you've been distant lately, or I feel like you're the one who's pulling away. Suddenly, the spotlight turns. The finger isn't pointing at her, it's pointing at you. Her betrayal gets buried beneath your defensiveness, and if you dare to protest, well now, you're just being aggressive, you're not listening, you're making her feel unsafe. This is the first manipulation, a reversal of blame. It's not always conscious, it's not always malicious, but it is powerful because it taps into a man's deepest need to protect, to understand, to be good in the eyes of the woman he loves. And when she turns the tables, painting herself as the one who's been hurt, your instinct isn't to fight, it's to fix. So now, instead of confronting the affair or even allowing yourself to hold her accountable, you're trying to prove that you're still the man she can count on. You apologize for things you didn't do. You become more affectionate, more available, more attentive. And the more you try to save the relationship, the more she tightens her grip on the story, that you are the reason she felt unloved, unwanted, unseen. This doesn't mean she never cared. It doesn't mean she didn't suffer too. But cheating is a choice. And when that choice is followed by manipulation instead of honesty, it creates a pattern that can be devastating to the man on the receiving end. Now let's talk about the second pattern that often emerges, the selective truth. This one is subtle, almost elegant. It's not an outright lie. No, it's a curated version of the truth. Just enough honesty to keep her conscience clear, and just enough omission to protect her from real consequences. Let me give you an example. She tells you she bumped into an old friend. She says they had coffee. What she doesn't mention is the frequency of these meetings, or the fact that the friend has become the person she turns to when she's frustrated with you. She leaves out the flirtation, the messages that you'll never see, the quiet decisions she's already making in her mind about where her loyalty truly lies. It's technically not a lie, right? But it's not the full truth either. And this kind of narrative control is dangerous because it creates just enough doubt for you to second guess your instincts. It keeps you on the edge, unsure, uneasy, but never quite able to call her out. Because technically she told you, but emotionally, she kept you in the dark. This form of manipulation works because it exploits the benefit of the doubt, and most men, especially the ones who love deeply, will give that benefit again and again, even when the evidence starts to pile up, because the alternative, that the woman you love is capable of lying to you while looking you in the eye, is too painful to accept. So what happens? You start to silence your questions, you start to shrink your suspicions, you start to believe that maybe your intuition is broken, or worse, that your need for clarity is just a symptom of insecurity. And that's when the third layer of control sets in. She begins to redefine loyalty. Now, this is where it gets really tricky, because instead of cheating being seen as a betrayal of you, It's reframed as a response to her own unmet needs. And if you express hurt or anger, that's positioned as a lack of compassion. I was lonely, she says. You weren't emotionally present. Suddenly, her choices become not just understandable but justified. And if you resist this narrative, if you dare to say that no matter what was missing, stepping outside the relationship without honesty is still a breach of trust, you're met with disappointment. She might call you rigid. She might say you're stuck in old ideas of fidelity. Or she might cry and say, I didn't think you'd ever try to understand me. Now the burden is on you again. Not only are you processing betrayal, you're also being asked to validate it. And let me tell you something, that's an incredibly disorienting place to be, because it turns morality into a negotiation, and it turns your pain into proof that you're not evolved enough to handle complexity. But betrayal isn't complex. It's painful. It's human. And when someone crosses that line, the first step should be honesty, not rewriting the terms of what loyalty means just to avoid facing the consequences. Still, for many men, this is the moment where they begin to lose their sense of self. They question their boundaries. They reframe their own expectations. And slowly, they start to disappear inside the relationship, hoping that if they can just be more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, she'll finally choose to stay loyal again. But here's the truth. Once manipulation becomes the method, clarity becomes the casualty. And without clarity, you can't rebuild trust. You can't heal. You can't move forward. What you need is not more emotional labor. What you need is your voice back, your perspective, your truth. Because the real danger isn't just that she cheated. It's that she's rewriting the story to make you forget it ever happened. When a man starts to feel invisible in his own relationship, not because he's withdrawn, but because the truth is being massaged, stretched, or erased altogether, something happens inside him. He doesn't just feel betrayed. He starts to feel erased, not only from her story, but from his own. And that's where the fourth manipulation begins to take root. This one is especially dangerous because it's cloaked in something most men are taught to honor: empathy. I call it emotional laundering. You see, instead of simply denying what she did, she filters the betrayal through layers of self-awareness and insight. I know I messed up, she might say, but I've realized now that I never really healed from what happened to me years ago. Or she'll open up about her past trauma, her unmet childhood needs, the pressure she feels as a woman, a wife, a mother. Now, let's be honest, those stories matter. Her pain matters, her healing matters. But what's quietly happening here is a subtle trade-off. Her emotional history becomes the focal point, and her betrayal, it becomes a footnote. Suddenly, you're not the man who was cheated on. You're the man who needs to rise above it, to become her therapist, her emotional rock, the one who understands why she was vulnerable, why she made a mistake, why she needs your love now more than ever. And if you struggle to be that man, if you say, but what about me? What about the trust you broke? She may sigh. She may look disappointed. She may say, I thought you were more evolved than this. So now you're stuck. Because if you show anger, you're labeled as emotionally primitive. If you forgive too quickly, you feel like a doormat. And if you try to hold her accountable, the conversation gets redirected to her healing, her wounds, her regrets. You don't even realize it's happening until weeks or months later, when the betrayal is no longer the point, but your inability to move past it is. This is how emotional laundering works. It doesn't erase the affair, it just rebrands it, wraps it in a soft blanket of psychology and self-awareness until the sharp edge of betrayal is dulled, and you're the one left questioning whether your pain is even valid anymore. Let's pause here for a second, because I want to be very clear. Healing from past wounds is real. Many women and men carry deep emotional burdens, but using that pain to excuse behavior that harms another is not healing, it's deflection. And if you've been on the receiving end of this, you probably felt a strange kind of guilt. Guilt for not being more patient. Guilt for not being more enlightened. Guilt for wanting to feel hurt. That guilt is manufactured. It's not yours. Let it go. Because the fifth and final manipulation is the most insidious of all: weaponized vulnerability. This one doesn't start with blame. It doesn't start with self-justification. It starts with tears, a trembling voice, a shaking hand, a soft, almost whispered confession that she doesn't know who she is anymore, that she feels lost, that the affair wasn't even about sex or love or escape. It was about feeling alive. And in that moment, something primal awakens in you. You want to protect her. You want to shield her from the shame she's finally admitting. You see her crying, breaking open, and you think, maybe this is real. Maybe this is her truth. Maybe now we can finally heal. But what you don't realize is that this vulnerability has a price tag. And the cost is silence. Because once she's opened herself up like this, if you push back, if you ask the hard questions, if you hold her feet to the fire, you become the man who kicks her when she's down. You're too cold, too critical, too unforgiving. So you stay quiet. You soften. You tell yourself, at least she told me. At least she's being honest now. And you wait for her to take full accountability. You wait for her to bring the truth into the light without filters, without edits, without tears meant to deflect rather than connect. But the longer you wait, the more the truth gets buried under her need to be consoled, to be understood, to be seen not as someone who cheated, but as someone who was lost, confused, broken. She doesn't ask for forgiveness. She doesn't ask how you feel. Instead, she asks for grace. And grace, when demanded, is not grace at all. It's emotional coercion wrapped in fragility. Now, you might be wondering, why would someone do this? Why would a woman, especially one who's intelligent, loving, emotionally aware, resort to these tactics? Because for many, shame is unbearable. And to admit that they've hurt the one person who stood by them, that they acted out of selfishness, not necessity, is to confront a version of themselves they can't accept. So instead, they build a story where they're still the good person, a victim of circumstances, a misunderstood heart who only wanted to feel whole. But here's the thing. Everyone makes mistakes. We are all capable of crossing lines we thought we never would. The issue isn't the mistake, it's what follows. It's the story we tell to cover the truth, to maintain the image, to hold on to power even as trust crumbles beneath us. And for the man on the other side of that story, it becomes a prison. Not because the walls are visible, but because the manipulation is so gentle, so emotionally dressed up, that you don't even realize you've been locked inside it. You start to doubt your instincts. You start to rewrite your own memories. You start to believe that love means accepting anything, as long as it comes wrapped in vulnerability. But that's not love, that's surrender. So what do? You begin by reclaiming your narrative. You take back your right to feel angry, to feel hurt, to demand truth, not as a weapon, but as a foundation. You stop performing emotional labor just to keep her comfortable. You stop pretending that betrayal, when spoken softly, is any less painful, and you remember who you are. Because if someone truly wants to rebuild with you, they don't manipulate, they confess, they sit in the discomfort, they take responsibility without turning it into a performance. They let you feel your feelings without trying to rewrite them. So many men stay silent, not because they don't feel, but because they don't want to be the one who breaks the peace. But let me ask you this. What kind of peace asks you to sacrifice your truth? You deserve more than that. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The way someone can betray you and still manage to become the center of the story, not the antagonist, not the disruptor, but the heroine in a tale of self-discovery. And you become the background noise, the scenery, the chapter she skips over in the retelling of how she finally learned to love herself. And yet so many men allow this rewrite to happen, not because they're weak, but because they've been trained to equate love with sacrifice. They've been told to be the anchor, the safe harbor, the one who holds steady even when the waves are tearing everything apart. So they stay, they try, they bury their needs beneath hers, and slowly their voice disappears from the relationship altogether. But here's what I want to say to you now, clearly, without any softness to dull the point. Your experience is real, your pain is valid, and your story deserves to be told, not just by her version of events, but by your truth. Because love that asks you to disappear, love that silences your hurt, love that rewrites your pain into a footnote under someone else's healing journey, that isn't love. That's emotional colonization. That's the theft of your inner world, your clarity, your dignity. You see, when someone betrays you and then manipulates the narrative, what they're really doing is preserving their self-image. They're not seeking repair, they're seeking relief. Relief from guilt, relief from consequence, relief from the discomfort of accountability. But real healing, real intimacy, requires two people to stand naked in the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is. It requires her to say, yes, I did this, and no, it wasn't because of you, it was my choice, and I take full responsibility, not cloaked in tears, not hidden behind trauma, not couched in philosophical explanations about desire and human need, just raw, clean, honest truth. And it requires you to stay grounded in your own reality, to stop absorbing the guilt she's trying to offload, to stop treating your boundaries like they're flexible just because she cries or trembles or tells you she's broken. She may be broken, but that doesn't mean you have to break too. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You're not just mourning the betrayal, you're mourning the woman she used to be, the memories, the laughter, the warmth. You're mourning the life you built together, the Sunday mornings, the late night talks, the small gestures of affection that felt so real. And it's okay to miss that. It's okay to grieve it. But don't let that grief keep you tied to a version of her that no longer exists, because holding on to a lie, even a beautiful one, will cost you more in the long run than walking away ever could. You know, I once spoke with a man, let's call him Eli. He was married for 10 years, built a home, raised 2 kids. And when his wife began pulling away, he did what most good men do. He stepped up, took on more at home, bought her flowers, asked gentle questions, listened. And when she finally confessed to the affair, it wasn't a confession. It was a monologue, a carefully rehearsed script about how she'd felt lonely for years, how he'd become too focused on work, how she needed to find herself, how she didn't mean to hurt him, how she hoped he could understand. And Eli, he said he felt like he was watching a play, a performance where he had no lines, no role, just a seat in the audience while his life unraveled. But the worst part wasn't the cheating. It was the rewrite, the suggestion that somehow he'd pushed her into it. That his stability, his loyalty, his predictability had made her crave excitement. That her need for something new was an inevitable reaction to his consistency. Let that sink in. The very qualities that made him trustworthy were reframed as the cause of her betrayal. This is how manipulation distorts reality. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It sounds thoughtful, insightful, even enlightened. But it's still a lie, because betrayal is not a reaction. It's a decision. And while context may help us understand that decision, it does not erase it. It does not absolve it. And it certainly does not give someone the right to gaslight you into believing it was somehow your fault. So what can you do? You draw the line. You stop looking for meaning in someone else's chaos. You stop waiting for her to validate your pain. You reclaim your narrative, not with rage, not with revenge, but with clarity. You say, this happened. I was low. I was there. I showed up. And even if I wasn't perfect, I deserved honesty. I deserved a choice. Because that's the truth. You didn't just lose her body to another man. You lost your right to consent, to know, to respond, to make your own choices based on reality, not revision. And if she can't sit with that truth, if she insists on reshaping the story to protect her ego, then she's not ready for real reconciliation. She's not ready for intimacy. She's only ready for image management. And that's not a relationship. That's a performance. So stop playing a role in someone else's production. Stand in your truth. Speak it, live it. And if the story she's telling the world doesn't include the full version of what happened, let that be her mirror, not yours. Because the truth, it doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be honored. There's a moment, after the noise quiets, after the tears dry, after the explanations lose their weight, when you sit alone, staring at a version of yourself you no longer recognize. Not because she broke you, but because you allowed the story she told to shape the one you told yourself. And in that silence, a question emerges: who am I if I'm not the man who keeps fixing things? It's a painful question, because for so long your worth was tethered to your ability to forgive, to be patient, to be understanding. You wore emotional endurance like a badge of honor. You believed love meant absorbing everything, her pain, her shame, her rewriting of events, so she wouldn't have to feel the full weight of what she'd done. But let me ask you, who's absorbing you? Who is holding your pain with the same tenderness you've extended again and again? Who's looking you in the eyes and saying, you didn't deserve this, and I'm sorry? Because in every relationship, there must be room for both people to be seen, not just the one who cries louder or who weaves a better story. And when betrayal happens, that balance becomes even more vital. The truth is, it's easier to forgive someone else than it is to confront the part of you that stayed silent, the part that knew, deep down, that the narrative was being twisted, but still smiled at dinner, still nodded during her tearful monologue, still said, I understand, when everything in your gut said, this is wrong. But that part of you isn't weak. He's loyal. He's kind. He believes in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that love can rise from the ashes of deception. And that part of you deserves to be protected now. Because what she did, that's on her. But what you allow going forward, that's on you. And here's where things begin to change. When a man stops trying to win back a woman who betrayed him, not with rage, not with coldness, but with stillness, he reclaims his power. Not because he punishes her, but because he stops abandoning himself in the name of keeping her. It begins with boundaries, not walls, not ultimatums, but boundaries, quiet, firm, unshakable lines that say, this is what I will no longer tolerate. This is what I need. This is who I am now. And if she can't meet you there, if her healing requires your silence, your suppression, your emotional labor, then maybe she's not healing, maybe she's hiding, because true healing doesn't demand you shrink. It invites you to expand. It makes room for both people's truths, not just the one that protects her reputation. You know, we often talk about betrayal as something that happens in a moment. A text, a hotel room, a kiss. But the deeper betrayal, the one that lingers, is when someone breaks trust and then uses your empathy to avoid taking full responsibility. And that's what this script has been about. Not just the affair, but the aftermath, the quiet erasure of your voice through softness, through storytelling, through curated vulnerability that makes it almost impossible for you to feel angry without being called cruel. But let me be clear, anger is not cruelty. Hurt is not weakness, and wanting accountability is not punishment. It's human. And until you allow yourself to feel it fully, to stop managing her emotions at the cost of your own, you will never be free. So what does freedom look like? It looks like clarity, like hearing her narrative and knowing which parts are hers and which parts were designed to keep you in place. It looks like honoring your boundaries even when she pleads, even when she performs, even when she paints you as the villain for no longer playing along. It looks like understanding that sometimes love is not the reason to stay. Sometimes it's the reason to walk away, because you finally love yourself enough not to stay in a story where your truth keeps getting edited. And no, it's not easy. There will be nights when her voice echoes in your head, when you wonder if you were too hard, too distant, too unforgiving, when you replay the story and ask yourself if maybe, just maybe, you misunderstood. But those thoughts, They're the echoes of a version of you who still believed love meant erasing yourself. You are not that man anymore. You've grown, you've grieved, you've seen through the illusion. And now, you are ready to live in your truth, unfiltered, unpolished, unafraid. The kind of man who doesn't need to control the narrative because he's finally learned to trust his own. Somewhere along the way, love turned into performance. You stopped speaking your truth, not because you didn't know it, but because every time you tried, the script changed. Her voice cracked. Her story shifted. The spotlight dimmed just enough to make you question the stage you were standing on. You were cast as the problem, the cold one, the inattentive partner, the one who didn't understand how complicated it all was. But what if I told you that your clarity was never the problem? What if the ache you've been carrying isn't because you lost her, but because you abandoned yourself trying to hold on to something that was already gone? We romanticize forgiveness. We celebrate the man who stays, who rebuilds, who tries again. But what we don't talk about is the man who loses himself in that rebuilding, the man who accepts crumbs and calls it compromise, the man who trades truth for peace, even as that peace rots inside him. You're not that man anymore. You've seen the playbook now. The reversal of blame, the curated truths, the weaponized tears, the emotional laundering, the rewriting of loyalty. It's not just about deception. It's about control. Not in the loud, aggressive way we usually imagine it, but in the soft, seductive, sophisticated way that reshapes reality until you no longer trust your own voice. But here's the beauty: your voice never left you. It's been whispering all along. In the way your stomach tightens when her words don't match her actions. In the way your heart aches when your pain is dismissed as impatience. In the way your spirit quietly begs for space, for silence, for truth. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for the bare minimum: honesty, accountability, partnership. And now, you're not just surviving the betrayal. You're rebuilding the foundation under your own feet. That foundation begins with new truths. Truth: you are allowed to feel betrayed and still be compassionate. Truth: you are allowed to walk away, even if she cries, even if she finally says all the right things. Truth: you do not owe anyone your continued silence just because they finally shared their pain. Truth: love does not require the sacrifice of your dignity. There's something sacred about a man who chooses integrity over image, who chooses truth over performance, who refuses to carry someone else's guilt on his back just to keep the illusion of closeness alive. That man, he is powerful, not because he dominates, not because he controls, but because he knows himself. And no amount of storytelling, no twist in the narrative can take that away from him. So if you're watching this and you've been there, or maybe you're there right now, this is not your ending. This is your awakening. You don't need to fight her story. You don't need to scream your truth into the void. You simply need to stop living in hers. You can step out of the role she assigned to you. You can stop being the savior, the scapegoat, the storyline that makes her feel better about what she did. You can choose peace that isn't manufactured, love that isn't manipulative. You can choose you. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most radical, most courageous thing a man can do in a world that keeps asking him to be everything for everyone while asking for nothing for himself. So here's what I want you to remember as you walk away from this video: you are not weak for wanting answers. You are not cruel for wanting space. You are not broken for feeling pain. And you are not selfish for choosing your truth over someone else's comfort. Let the lies fall where they may. Let the story be rewritten again and again. But you stay grounded in what you know. You stay whole. You stay free. If this message has touched something inside you, I want you to know your story matters. Your voice matters. And you are not alone. Leave a comment below. Tell your truth. Say what was never said. A space not to blame, not to shame, but to be seen, to be heard, to be real. And if this video gave you something, clarity, courage, comfort, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more conversations coming, honest ones, unfiltered ones, because men deserve that space too. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay true to your truth.